Hello and welcome to today's project video from eWardWinning Outdoors at ewardwinning94.wordpress.com. For today's project, I am going to be replacing tile in my entryway. I installed this years ago. It was pretty inexpensive stick-on vinyl tiles that, if I remember right, my wife picked up on clearance when a local discount store was going out of business. So they were cheap tiles. They've lasted 20 plus years, so I really cannot complain. But they're starting to peel and lift, and it is time to replace them, especially in that high traffic area. So the basic supplies I'm going to use today, and I may add something else as we go, but I've got a big piece of plywood for cutting on, a large carpentry square or framing square for making good cuts with them, a couple of different sizes of small pry bars for removing the wood trim, a wood block, and a piece of cardboard here that I can use to protect the wall as I pry that wood trim off so I don't damage the walls that I fairly recently repainted. Tape measure for measuring, a utility knife for cutting the tiles with, and then a floor scraper, which will be very handy as we get to the actual removal of the tiles. As I mentioned, I think the tiles that are there were pretty cheap ones originally. I can't complain, they've lasted many years for relatively inexpensive and minimal work, but I'm putting a little higher quality on this time. Some Armstrong flooring, self-adhesive vinyl tiles. Should be a fairly easy project. It'll take a little bit of time. I really have no idea whether this is going to be a 2-hour project or several evenings after work. So let's get started and see how it goes. Of course, before we can put new tiles down, we have to get the old ones up, and the first step for that, most of these tiles are actually laid in underneath the wood trim. So I've got a piece of cardboard here that I'm going to put up against the wall. I will slide a small pry bar down there using the cardboard to keep the wall from getting messed up. Because fairly recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, I repainted this whole area. And I really don't want to ding up the walls that I spent a lot of time fixing after removing some really nasty wallpaper that had been there. So we'll just pry this away. You can see the edge of the tiles goes actually almost up underneath the edge of the sheetrock. This is really handy because that means I don't have to go 100% perfectly to the edge of the wall when I put the new tiles down. So I'm going to do this all the way around the edge of the work area here. I won't show you every piece of trim I removed because it's basically the same thing, and after about the 4th or 5th piece of trim that would get really boring. We'll be back shortly. Okay, all of the trim is removed, leaving some really ugly areas where the old wallpaper that is no longer in existence was covered up and painted and removed, but not behind the trim. I also removed the trim around the doors here because it went all the way down to floor level, and it will be much easier to strip off the old tile and lay down the new with that out of the way. So it just makes the whole job just a hair easier. So the next step is going to be removing the old tile, and some of it is loose enough that I think it will probably come up pretty readily just by using one of these little thin pry bars, like so. And for some of it, I will use this floor scraper tool. It has a fairly sharp blade on it and a little bit of heft to it. So it is designed to be able to slide along and remove carpeting and tile and other such things. And this may be a pretty quick process, or it may be a real pain depending on how securely this stuff is stuck. And also some of it I had tried to glue down when it was not staying well. So this is probably going to take a while. Again, I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me scrape up what I estimate to be about 35 of these tiles. So I'll work on it. May stop for supper sometime along the way, and we'll come back when some more progress has been made. Okay, a first lesson learned already. This tile that was peeling does not want to come up. Scraping and yanking on it and prying on it wasn't doing much good. But with the heat gun, it softens it right up. It loosens the adhesive on the back, and it softens the vinyl tile so it peels up neatly instead of breaking off in a jillion little pieces. So that's going to save all kinds of time. Switching to using the heat gun to remove the tiles saved all kinds of time. It got it down to about 10 seconds a tile, and they peeled off very nicely. There are a lot of little fragments and pieces, and the next step here, which is absolutely essential, is this floor has to be completely cleaned of every little piece of debris, because any little piece that's left behind will create a lump under the new tile, which will create a spot that will eventually fail on the tile. The floor itself is very tacky from the adhesive on the old tiles, so it's a bit of a process. I am using the floor scraper that is shown here. It is helpful in scraping some of this debris off. It's not perfect, but it has helped in removing some of that, and I'll work on that a bit more before we start putting down new tiles. But I'd say it was down to less than 30 minutes to get all the old tiles off once I started using the heat gun. Okay, before I start laying the first of the tiles, I'm going to do one thing here that I'll show you, and it'll make sense in just a moment. But I'm going to use my square, line it up on this board and on the edge of one of these tiles. I'm going to hold it down as tight as I possibly can so the tile doesn't move on me, and I'm going to make a cut on the back side. And that cut should allow me then to hold it and have that tile break neatly, hopefully. Yep, there we go. Snaps it off there, and you will see in just a minute why we did that. Okay, it's kind of tight quarters here, so I'm going to try to do this to where you can see what I'm doing. But I'm actually getting ready to lay down my first tile. So I'm going to peel off the paper backing, and I can actually see the lines where the tiles were before. So I'm going to start in this corner here, and I want to get it absolutely flush against the door jamb, because that's the square part that I'm going to be working away from. So I'm just going to lay this down and press it into place, and that's actually laying down pretty nicely. What I did do before I did that is I used just like a wide putty knife here and just re-scraped everything. I'm going to pause for just a second and then we'll do another. Okay, I've done a little bit more scraping there right next to the last tile I put in, and this is where that one that I cut shorter is going to come into play. For that one, I am going to put it in the same manner, but right next to the first. I'll peel my backing off, touch just the edge there because I don't want it to stick before I'm ready, and smooth that into place. And what I have created there is a slight offset to where the seams on the tiles will be random instead of perfectly square. These are kind of a simulated wood grain tile, so I'm kind of going to make it look like a simulated board floor instead of having exactly everything lined up in every direction like a traditional 12-inch tile would likely be. So back in a few with some more progress. Okay, we've actually almost got the main entryway done here. Haven't started in the closet yet, but the main area is almost done. But there's a couple areas I kind of have to cut around here. So each tile I do, I specifically make sure that area is clear. And what I'm going to do here is I'll line this tile up, but I'm going to have to cut it to go around the corner here. So I'm just going to make a little mark right there to show where to cut it. And then I'll have to kind of move around here a little bit to get the right distance to cut off this direction. I'm going to line it up with the other existing tile, and then I'll make a little mark right here. Then we come over here to my cutting board where I've got my square and my cutting stuff and everything. So I'm going to look for those two marks that I made, and I'm going to make sure they follow around to the back side of the paper here because I want to cut on the back side. use my square to lay out and mark the area that I'm going to cut off. Go on the other side of the square there just so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. And again, this will be partly covered up by the wood trim, so it's not absolutely essential that it be perfect, but I still want it to be pretty close. So I've got my marks. I'll use my straight edge here. And usually I just score it really good and bend it, but since this has to break two different directions, I'm going to make this cut several times to make sure that it is good and deep so I don't break the desirable part of the tile. I'm also cutting from the center point to the edge. That way if I happen to slip, I don't leave a big gouge across the tile that's going to split where I don't want it to. And I'll do the same thing over here, use my metal straight edge. Cut that. And this should be cut enough now that, yep, that'll fold up, snap off clean as can be, and that's ready to install. And finally, after about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of total work, here we are with all new tile laid in the entryway. I have not replaced all the wood trim yet. I'll do that here after supper. And I haven't actually finished inside the closet. I will do that maybe tomorrow evening, but the bulk of it's done. You can walk in my entryway again, and there's no tile coming up. So overall, I'd say I'm fairly satisfied with the results, and it was not a horrendous project to undertake. Hope you enjoyed watching this. Click the like button down below if you enjoyed it, and if you'd like to see more projects, hints, hacks, travels, outdoor advice, etc., hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything else I share. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.